Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the new moon in the second decan of Aries. I am joined today by my good friend CV Henriette of Art of the Zodiac. How you doing today, CV?
Good, Spencer. Lovely to be with you on this wonderful Wednesday, Mercury day.
What day is
I love
it? The moon's conjoining Jupiter and Pisces today, so we're all just in this like dream
Wow.
state right now. Right? In this balsamic moon phase that we're recording this in before the new moon. Um, so yeah. So welcome, CV, and thank you for joining me today. I'm just going to take a look at the chat real quick, and then we'll dive into it. We have a few people joining us in the chat, and if you're just joining us in the chat, my friends, drop me a message in there. Let me know where you're coming from. Let us know that you're here. Um, I see we've got Jody joining us from sunny South Florida. Thank you, Jody. William Holloway is here from Baltimore. Hello, William.
William.
Hey, William's a mutual friend of ours that CV talks to a lot on her Instagram channel. So welcome, William. Place of stillness is here. Hello, Manuela, coming from Sweden. Nice to see you as well, my friend. Tarja is here from Finland. Welcome, Tarja. Raven Gray is stopping in from the Sunflower State. Ooh, sunflowers. Chet is here. Chet Clover from Detroit. Hey, Chet. Stopping in from my neck of the woods here in Michigan. Remco is stopping in from the Netherlands. Hello, Remco, my friend. And we have some other folks stopping in. So as they stop in, we'll welcome you in. But yes, Fionn here from Ireland. So thank you, my friends. We've got a really nice crew, really nice community. Yevgen's here from California. Hello, Yevgen. Welcome. Hope you're doing well, my friend. So we're going to dive into the new moon in Aries 2 today, CV. And before we get into that, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, your services, where we can find you, and all things CV.
Well, my name is CV Henriette. I do astrological readings and writtens under Art of the Zodiac, where you can find me on the internet, artofthezodiac.co. And then I have an Instagram account, which is where I do a lot of my astro tarot chats with people. And what else? I was born at 0 degrees Aries, so I'm
Yay.
extra stoked for this talk.
That's
And
that's why I wanted you to come on with me today, because I always like bringing on people that have lived some of the placements we're going to deal with. So I'm
yeah,
really excited to hear your perspective on that.
yeah, I have Mars on my midheaven in Aries to the degree. So
Nice.
anyway,
So
yeah,
you have
so
Mars in this decan, right? In the second
uh-huh,
decan? There
uh-huh,
you go. Okay.
yeah, yeah. So I'm extra excited for this talk, and yeah, so follow me on Instagram at art underscore of underscore the underscore zodiac, and let's get to it.
Okay. And you have something coming up this afternoon if people want to join you on your channel, right?
I do. I have a IG live chat with my friend and astrologer Monica Bravo, who's actually an evolutionary astrologer and visual artist. So it's exciting. I'm going to chat with her about something I, honest to goodness, know like basically nothing about. I know a little bit about art. I know nothing about evolutionary astrology. So hop in for the ride, friends.
Well, it's always nice to get different perspectives, right? I mean, we kind of have a more of a Hellenistic traditional bent here, but I would say that I'm still open to the divine communicating in different ways. So to each his
Oh,
own.
oh, absolutely. I get so excited, and I'm sure I, not to dovetail, but like I'm sure there's a lot of different types of astrologers on your channel today. But it is always like amazing to me when I can sit with an astrologer who studies and practices in a completely like different way and
Yeah.
get like amazing results.
Yeah.
I don't know how it happens, but it does, and it's super exciting to
Well,
witness.
I would say that, and this is an interesting tangent for me because, when I do my webinars, I call them integrative divination. So thinking of astrology as divination, as long as you have a system that you're consistent with,
Mhm.
I think that you can receive messages in certain ways. It's sort of, I was talking about this with another friend recently, where we were talking about different methods to connect spiritually, and we started talking about that story of the different mystics that were touching the elephant, and one was like, it's like a tree, with someone touching the leg, and someone's like, it's like a snake touching the tail, it's like a giant leaf with the ear. So I think that that's one of the reasons I think it's good to explore different cultures, different voices, different time frames in history, because then when we start comparing those things, we can see what truths are we able to pull out from that and condense, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Quick tangent on that. I recently started reading tarot.
Mhm.
Long story around that. And I still have no idea how it works, but it does.
Yeah, yeah.
So I feel like if you
Synchronicity.
ever want to like understand like divination, if you're an astrologer and you haven't picked up tarot, like do so, because it just expresses everything you just said.
100%. Well, some more business to get out of the way before we
Yep.
dive into this new moon, CV. I have my Decans of Aries webinar coming up on April the 9th, which is a Saturday. I'm doing kind of like the second Saturdays of the month generally for these webinars at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And this is the last week for my coupon code Aries20. So if you want to save 20% on the Decans of Aries or the spring bundle that includes Aries, Taurus, and Gemini, make sure you click the link in the description of this video, or however you're listening. You can go to my website, spencermichaud.com as well. And make sure you sign up, because it'd be great to see all of you there. I'm really, really excited for the really great group that we have working together to uncover some of these secrets of the universe, and all these comparisons with different divinatory systems. We do talk about tarot, fixed stars, astrology, mythology. There's a lot of storytelling going on. So looking forward to seeing all of you there. A couple things that you can do if you want to support the work that I'm doing here today. First thing you can do is it's so amazing that you're all here. Leave me a comment in the chat box. That is the first thing that would be really helpful. Make sure you hit the like button. If you're new to the channel, subscribe so you know when we're going to have special guests moving forward. And there's a little $sign in the chat here that's called a super chat or a super sticker if you'd like to make a material donation to the work that I'm doing here. Or you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. All right, so those are sort of the business things getting out of the way here. I'm going to take a look at the chat again here, CV. Do you have the chat up on your end as well?
No, how do I do this? Oh,
So if you just go to the YouTube link, you'll be able to see the chat. Andrea is joining us, so another
oh,
mutual
hi.
friend that we have here from Croatia, a card slinger, if you will, extraordinaire. Jody's saying, this is such a really nice group. You all are awesome. So nice to be sharing space with all of you. Yes, Jody, we appreciate you being here. You are awesome, Jody. We've got Remco saying, so who's excited for the first lunar cycle of the new astrological year? Well, I am, Remco. I'll tell you that. I'm excited for it. Susanna is here from Finland. Susanna is a wonderful visual artist as well, CV.
Ooh,
And I've been following along with her journey, and she has some postcards available of her work. So check that out. I'll give her a plug of her really cool art.
what is her IG?
Uh, maybe Susanna can throw that in the chat box, but I think it's Susanna Philaja, Phlaja.
Yeah.
Yeah. So check her out. And Lisa Newcomb is joining us here from upstate New York. Welcome, Lisa.
Ooh.
All right. So, and then another Tanya. Tanya is here from Mesa, Arizona. Nice to see you, Tanya.
I just wanted to add to your shout outs
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
Andrea, who's on here, Space Tiger 9, or
Yes.
Space Tiger, is my tarot teacher. So
Nice.
also, if anyone wants to study the tarot, I've found an amazing guide that I will share with all of you.
Yeah, Andrea's a really great photographer too. So I think following Space Tiger Tarot 9 on Instagram is a good way to go, because there's often Andrea will put a reading up with this beautiful black background and crystals associated with a card. It's really nice. I really appreciate the work that she's putting out there as well. Carol is joining us from New York City. Hello, Carol. Trying to shout everyone out in the chat. All right, my friends, should we dive in?
Yeah.
Unpack this stuff here. So just a little bit of a review of the last week or so. Should we look at the chart first, or you want to chat about some of the, some of
I
the
have been
events?
I let's it's up to you. I have been hiding this week. I was
Yeah,
traveling and somehow like
yeah. We've been work. Well, I guess just to set the scene, we've come recently out of a a malefic enclosure of Venus. So Venus was in a malefic enclosure. I broke this down pretty in quite a bit of depth in my astrology of April forecast. So if you haven't seen that yet, check that out, because we had a really nice discussion about um, malefic enclosure. Now, what I'll say, so you can see on my chart here, and I'll pull it up and I'll draw. So you can see the Venus was recently in between, sandwiched in between Mars and Saturn, having a really tough time. And it recently escaped that enclosure on Monday. And over the weekend, we had this cultural event that has been in the forefront of the news, and with the slap heard around the world at the Oscars recently, right? So that's and there's been many astrologers that have broken that down in depth with the charts. The astrology is pretty poignant. I guess what I'll say just astrologically with that is, Will Smith was having some pretty challenging transits to his moon in Scorpio. All of this malefic enclosure action was squaring his Scorpio moon with the moon conjoining Mars on his midheaven during that time frame. Chris Rock had things going on around that period of time, as well as Jada Pinkett Smith. I've been trying to absorb all of the different facets with this event, CV, and I don't want to spend too much time on it today, but I do think it's worth addressing just a little bit. My thought on it at this point, and see, I want to hear your take on this as well, because I only caught your and William's talk at the end. I know you probably went through it a little bit more, but this seems like to be a bit of like a Rorschach test for where people stand on certain issues. Like it's more like, what do you see from it? Does
absolutely.
that make sense?
The thing I would like keep saying about this is that
Yeah.
like now just to jump in and I think
Yeah.
absolutely agree with you. It's like at the end of the day, like it doesn't like was it fake? Was it not fake? Like it doesn't matter. Like do I really care? I mean, I don't know these people. Quite frankly, it's none of my business. But the event itself to me was only interesting in so much as that it triggered everyone else's reactions, right?
Sure.
Like so this thing happened and then suddenly like everyone's views came out, which is interesting thinking about like the whole idea about like Venus issues, right? Like whole alopecia, whatever. And this thing's so complicated, but it brought up a lot of people's feelings about so many issues, and that's
And their values, their Venusian values, right?
exactly.
Right. Yeah. I don't. My initial thought is I do not think it was staged. I think that was a real thing that happened. Um, that's my official stance on it. I just can't imagine a person potentially throwing away their career in the biggest moment of their life. I think that, um, I don't know though. People are going to have opinions on that, but I think that here's the perspectives I've seen with it. Like there are people that are rightfully triggered by domestic violence or violence in general, and that are calling out, trying to resolve a conflict in a more peaceful fashion. There are some other folks that have been talking about, defending the honor of one's family, and there's some people that are more in support of that. There's been the whole thing about how far is too far when you're, uh, making a joke or something like that. There's the alopecia part of that with a condition that is out of her control that would make it even more painful, and trying to acknowledge that part of it. I think I've heard from my partner, who is Black, some disappointment about how people may try to twist the narrative towards Black people in this type of thing as well, and the disappointment that she's feeling about, at the moment that should have been a point of success for a Black actor in a point of inclusion, there's yet another controversy with it, and that the frustration I've been hearing from her this week, I think is important to acknowledge, as far as like, how are we creating equal spaces? And does that make sense as well? That's another viewpoint that I've been hearing. It's just so many different takes on it, and there's other people that have really righteous indignation about how it was happening. They should strip his award or something like that. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I just think that it's very fascinating to see how a violent event, Mars and Saturn, right, is bringing out all of these issues to discuss about values. I guess I just will underscore that, values, right? What do you think, CV, and what have you been? How have you been experiencing this event?
Well, I think the same thing, right? So, in the fact that I mentioned, was it staged, was it not staged? My whole point was it doesn't matter, right? The point is
Yeah.
that this was an event that brought out feeling like our values on Venusian topics, right? And so we're all here having this discussion.
Yeah.
And again, we don't need to sort of get into the minutia of the discussion, but I did think it was interesting too, like thinking about the whole Aries aspect to all of this. I think it was just after Mercury had ingressed into Aries. And so
Mm-hmm.
thinking about this like violent communication, but I did think it was interesting as well. The other part that I'll add to this astrologically that I thought was sort of pertinent was that the quote that has been circling around by Denzel Washington's advice to Will Smith shortly before this. And he said, I'm reading now, in your highest moments, be careful. That's when the devil comes to you.
I love that quote.
And so I
Yeah.
thought, I do too. But I think to me, this quote, and there's so many different ways to look at it, is all about Aries, right? Because Mars and Aries, right? This is like the the sun and its most exalted moment. It is the warrior, but it is also that which the spark of life. And like it's sort of a warning, right? I think that's the sort of challenge for especially maybe Aries energy or maybe Aries natives,
Yeah.
is that you can go really high, but be careful because you can go just as low, right? And that's maybe sort of
Totally.
exalted.
And what a stark contrast seeing him go through, that act, and then literally 10 minutes later achieve one of the highest honors of his life, right? Of his career, the highest honor he could basically receive in that line of work. And the contrast with that. And I think there's one angle that I didn't really discuss is, maybe the mental health of Will Smith at this point as well. Like, I think that I've been trying to just get educated on all of the different perspectives, and he's a trauma survivor, someone who's learned about violence with his father being a pretty violent person, which doesn't condone his actions. It's just kind of how it's just seeing like, how does someone get to that point? Do you know what I'm saying? And understanding it from all perspectives, I think is my Venus and Gemini approach to this. Just before I say, well, this is this, I don't like wading into these conversations with like, oh, this should have happened, without like exploring first and he trying to hear multiple voices and perspectives first. But yes, I like that you are drawing it back to Aries, because we had Mercury on that 0 degrees Aries point almost, or it was a couple degrees into Aries, triggering this very dynamic response, maybe one that wasn't well thought out, that was just a visceral, raw, emotional reaction. And that could be part of what we're going to be experiencing coming up with this new moon too, is how do we take these actions and how do we create sovereignty from establishment of self and saying, the first decan, I think we see us saying, this is what we're not, this is what we're rejecting. And the Sun and Mercury have been moving through that first decan with this Oscars event, right? Where it's literally like the martial axe being like, cutting off and saying, no, this is not what I believe in. This is not what I am. And then when we get to the second decan here at 11 degrees of Aries, with this new moon, we've already kind of, I guess the old word would be conquering the territory. And now we're establishing who we are and what we do believe in, not what we are rejecting. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think of it, it's interesting, not rejecting is an interesting term. I keep thinking when I think of like the first decan of Aries of just like the amount of sheer effort it takes for growth, right? Whether it be like a seed coming through the soil or like childbirth or like someone like even an artist who's bringing an idea into fruition, like this idea of like it's almost like there's just this solid focus on your goal where everything else just sort of doesn't matter, and it can be really like aggressive, right? Because at that point, like there can be casualties, right?
Right.
So I think of interesting not as much as even a conscious rejection, but just of a focus, and everything else kind of gets to the wayside.
Yeah, it's like that small seed trying to push through the surface of the soil. Like it's got one purpose. It's like you were saying, it's got this like drive, right? I'm taking a look at the chat here because we have people that are weighing in. Andrea is talking. Thank you for the shout out. Yeah, well, Andrea, we're glad that you're here and we're glad that you're doing the work that you're doing. So, Remco said, let's see. Lisa said the first instinct was that it was staged. I mean, I guess, I could see why that instinct would be, because it's so shocking and so like out of maybe the norm. And nothing over the last few years, I think we've become desensitized to events to the point where I could see people being like, yeah, the only thing that's going to get people's attention is something so extreme. You know what I'm saying? I understand that perspective on some level. Meredith is joining us from Southern Maine. William is saying people's view on it says more about them than any of the facts of the slap, as most things go. Yeah, I agree. I mean, this just really brings up a lot of really interesting questions for me as far as how do we experience a collective event. And what I think is rare about the Will Smith, Chris Rock confrontation is that with the internet and with our own little worlds that we seem to be traversing in, it is more rare, I think, now for us to have a collective experience. Would you agree with that, CV?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. Yeah, totally. I was thinking about this as like, it's interesting. This collective experience is so like divisive.
Yeah. Well, I say establishing, that we're all kind of in our own collective worlds, because that is one of the significations of Aries too, is being able to establish your own world, your own territory, your own singular perspective. And I like to talk about Mars. The difference between Mars's homes of Aries in the spring and Mars's fall home in Scorpio is the severing and separating that Mars action likes to take is in service of the creation or the establishment of an individual consciousness in Aries to be able to say, I am severing from the collective. Whereas in Scorpio, it's more about severing from the body and returning consciousness to the collective, like in a composting action. So we have one, kind of martial action to create future fertility, and then we have one martial action that will create the fuel for the next season and return something to the earth. So see, go ahead.
No. I love that, the analogy. And I was thinking that sort of something I've been thinking about, well, with Aries, the question that I always bring up to people is, I think so often with Aries, we have to like remind ourselves that there is a difference between self-preservation and selfishness. It's like
Yeah.
Aries skirts that fine line.
Mm.
I've been thinking about, I've been thinking a little like an anecdote around Aries for a while now, which I will pause to ask if we have time for me to share.
Sure.
So, this is, and maybe to build off this, but um, recently, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the artist Leonora Carrington. I know Space Tiger is. She was she I will dare say she was one of the most famous surrealists, specifically Mexican surrealist artists in the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, I was reading her. She has a autobiography she wrote. She actually wrote it. I think she transcribed it in the 80s, but about an incident that happened. Oh, I want to say it was 40s, so like during maybe the Second World War, where she was put in an asylum in Spain, right? Which, we get these stories of many women of that generation died in asylums, right? I could think of like Vivian Haywood, Zelda Fitzgerald, et cetera, et cetera. So, anyways, she wrote this biography called Down Below. And in it, she talks about her time in this asylum. And what's crazy is that, she got out, right? And she ended up having this amazingly prolific career. And her work is so, so surreal. Like, it's just wild. And, when I first looked up her chart, you'd expect like Aquarius placements, like Pisces placements, something sort of like psychedelic. But this woman has a stellium in Aries. It's like
Wow.
fantastic. And so I was reading this book with a friend of mine who's not an astrologer, who's a professor actually. And he was saying what's so interesting is throughout this book, they're giving her all sorts of drugs and she had a mental breakdown, out of her mind. But the one through line is that she has this like ego that almost seems just maddening, right? So she's always like, she never loses the sense of self, right? She's like, the world, I am one with the world. It's this point of view, this I that she never loses, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to think about, like, wow, this feels like her Aries saving her, right? Like Aries is that which can hold on to a belief that is I think of it as like, right, cardinal fire. It is the spark of creation. And so seeing it in this woman, like this chart of this person who wrote about the world in such interesting, expansive ways, but really there is within this character this self-preservation that is, again, like the birth of the world, I think of in her. And anyway, that's to me is so Aries.
I like the focus on self-preservation. I think that Mars in general is actually the planet that is most focused on that, saying how can I defend my right to be, or I think that even if we compare it with Scorpio, you're defending your life to the very last breath. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you're trying to hold on to the spark of life on some level. You know what I mean? Like, and you're willing to do anything, like that scorpion stinger, to hang on so tightly. But eventually we can't. Like eventually we can't. Fighting. This is what I think about Mars and Aries in general is, as quickly as it arose, it had to die back. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, so like, for example, in the Oscars thing, you had this event and then everyone's just in like shock. And then the guy goes up and gets an award and then, people go home. Sometimes it's the same with a battle as well. And there are prolonged battles, but every once, and this is not me condoning violence whatsoever, but sometimes there is a type of violence in nature that I think is related to Mars and Aries season and the spring season. Like there is like I like the metaphor of the seedling cracking open the seed wall to be able to expand. and to be able to grow and to be able to force its way out through the soil, sometimes there is a necessary violent push to
Mhm.
get to where we want to go, to initiate and to remove the inertia that we may be feeling. And I don't know exactly how that relates to the Oscars thing, maybe the initiating the conversation around values potentially. But what a moment! I'm still kind of like, wow, that happened. Like it's, um, yeah, and we've got a lot of interesting things going on in the chat here. Uh, Fion says, I've seen the slap read in the context of Will Smith being a Scientologist, and in Scientology, slapping is commonly used within the organization to exert power and authority. Well, that feels sort of Aries and Marshall on some level.
That
At what
feels
point?
so
Go ahead.
Scorpio.
Yeah, well, Will Smith, he is that Scorpio moon.
Mhm.
He has Saturn in Aries and also the North Node in Aries, um, but a Libra sun. His charts, it's not it's an interesting chart, but it's not. It doesn't look like a happy chart. It really doesn't. Like there's a lot of stuff where there's a lot of uncomfortable planets where his like squeaky, clean, friendly image is now starting to crack a little bit, and we're seeing a little bit behind the veneer and the facade. And Yevgen is making a good point that making a correct judgment is hard, especially when we only have the tip of the iceberg and no vision of these Hollywood underwaters. I agree with that, Yevgen, and that's why I'm very careful right now to just say this is right, this is wrong, because I do think that it's easy to come to a judgment and in a visceral reaction to some of these things, and we don't know the whole story with all of it. But it makes for a good conversation. So Jody is saying Will Smith is also an advocate of the Bhagavad Gita, so it's shocking that he acted in this manner. Yeah, I mean, CV, correct me if I'm wrong, but someone presenting themselves as a spiritual person doesn't necessarily mean that they are. Right?
Oh, absolutely. And also too, right? Like people are human. I know that I
Yeah.
like I spend, like I practice transcendental meditation. I like, spend most of my leisure time at like sound baths and like floating. And I try really hard to be chill
Yeah.
as an example, but like I have a terrible temper. And
Mm.
the reason I do these things and, is because I'm constantly trying to keep them under control. And so, right, like I just know personally what it's like to have a breaking moment. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
this doesn't fit. Like, so I think it's interesting. I think a lot of times people who are doing practices like that, if they are in earnest, and again, I don't know, we don't know his life, but I think sometimes people do that because they really do struggle. And it just, again, the tip of the iceberg, like, I don't know Will Smith, but it feels like looking at his chart, just guessing, there's a lot going on there that we don't know. And this
Yeah.
feels like it was definitely triggered by something much larger. I don't know what.
Yeah, and I go back to trying to understand his past. Like when I do a reading with someone, I spend probably at least 45 minutes just talking about their origin story because
Yeah.
I just think that we play out these cycles in a chart cyclically and in a spiral way. And a lot of the behaviors that we're still processing as adults, we picked up in our early childhood environment. And again, 100% not condoning any of his actions, but just trying to understand what would push someone to that, um, to do something like that, I think is important, to be able to unravel it, to prevent it in the future, to learn from it, to process it. I guess I hope that Will Smith gets the help that he needs. If he's obviously going through some stuff right now. Um, I hope all of them get the help that they need. This is something I've been a little bit joking about with my partner, though, is all of these people, Chris Rock, Jada Pinkett, Will Smith, all of them get to go, cry themselves to sleep on their giant piles of money after this. Do you know what I'm saying? Like what is really at stake for them? They're all like super wealthy Hollywood elite type people. And yeah, they might be a little bit embarrassed, but where's the real repercussion for them on some level? Do you know what I'm saying?
I it's interesting because I think like the older I get, like I'm not condoning or saying like let's have pity on anyone, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
not saying that. But I think that like it's like me personally, right? Like you start to realize that wow, like the universe is much bigger than this one particular life.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
like
you're right. No,
so
yeah,
it's
I
like
agree with
hey,
that.
like maybe they're sleeping, but if they have any sort of bigger vision, there's a sense of like fuck, like
That's a great point.
am I going to come back like this in the next life? Like, or, we all have our certain things and standards we live up to. So,
Well, and if Will Smith really is this proponent of the Bhagavad Gita, he just created a giant ripple of karma. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not a year from now, but maybe in another, maybe a lifetime from now. Who knows? But those actions are going to reverberate out in some kind of, you know, wave-like fashion. So I think that, yeah, that's a great point, CV. And just having a lot of money and power and status doesn't make people happy either. So that it
or,
doesn't mean that they're happy.
or give them mental stability, right? Like
Right.
that's the thing. Like the mind can truly be a prison. And I know that like from experience, and I don't know, you mentioned that he had like sort of an abusive father, but like
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, like experiencing that sort of violence and any sort of like mental trauma, that stuff doesn't leave you, right? You can
Right.
be in a perfect place in your life, absolutely. And like, we all have our sort of proverbial demons.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I just want to say also that uh, I think Jada Pinkett is beautiful, and even with the condition that she has, she's still a gorgeous woman, and you know, she was, she has nothing to be ashamed of, is in my estimation.
so can I just add to that
Yeah.
something that really bothered me in the criticisms?
Yeah.
Um, is that people are like, Jada Pinkett's so beautiful, don't bother her.
Yeah.
Okay, well, like, so if she wasn't beautiful, we could bother her, right? I just don't like the statement. People are being like, protect her because she's so beautiful. I think, like, no, protect her because, like, she's human and don't fuck with people. Like, that's just mean. Like, I just don't like this thing of, like, because she's beautiful, she is somehow, like, that's why we shouldn't, like,
No, no, 100%. Like it doesn't, you know, I don't think that anyone should be needled for
and I'm not saying
something out
you're
of their
saying that. I'm
control.
just saying I've heard comments to that effect. Not
Yeah.
that you're saying that.
And that's true. Yeah, I could see that perspective as well, as that, you know, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to react to that necessarily. I think you're right. Like it's not that she gets any special treatment because she is very pretty. Um, it's just an observation, I guess, is that it's she's working it still, you know, with that green dress and everything. But anyway, um, I'm
Absolutely,
looking at
that comment.
what's that?
No, 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 absolutely. I mean, I agree that she is beautiful. It just was
Yeah,
interesting that in some of the comments, people were like, "She's beautiful. Don't mess with her." And I just the line of thinking like, okay, but even if she wasn't quote beautiful, we still shouldn't mess with her because, quite frankly, that's mean on so many levels. But aside from that, yeah, she's gorgeous.
yeah,
That dress was amazing.
yeah. And yes, be nice to people. Like, that's really the bottom line, right? Okay. So I'm looking through the chats here. Uh, let's see. Remco says, I think somewhere, I saw somewhere Mars was conjunct his natal MC at that moment. It was, you're right, Remco, as well as the moon. So the moon activating that Mars aspect on the MC. The moon, think of the moon as like a timekeeper where the moon is activating things like a music box where you have this cylinder with the little tines on it that are activating the little notes of a music box. I think the moon does that with planets as well. Jody says, I don't think there would be any benefit for that to be staged. I tend to agree with you, Jody. Although there is a saying in Hollywood that any attention is good attention. But I do not believe in my heart of hearts that it was a staged thing. Henry says, when we had the new moon, Mars, Cazimi, and Libra, I thought that we would be seeing more and more uncivil actions to the point where it's normalized as the way fights are coming about. Yeah, that last Mars Cazimi in Libra was pretty funky, wasn't it? Over the fall, um, both the Sun and Mars were in places that they're not super comfortable in. The Sun is in its fall, and Mars being in its exile. Um, so I hope we don't normalize, abuse or assault. That's that's uh, we're living in strange times. I'm still trying to process it on some level. Just the moment in history we find ourselves in. Um, Jody. All right, I'm kind of just taking a look through here. You seeing anything?
I, I still don't know how to look at the chat.
Okay. If you just go to my if you go to my YouTube channel, you can just click on the video and
Oh,
the
there's
chat will be coming up.
okay, see
But
it.
make sure you mute it.
Oh yeah.
Uh okay.
Look at the chat.
Yeah, Fion says the ripple of karma is setting a precedent for hitting comedians. Yeah, I think that's not a good precedent either. Um, yeah, that's not good. But make sure you mute
Oops.
it. We're on the delay.
Yeah, I thought I had muted it. I'm laughing and getting warm.
That's all right. Um, Karen is joining us from New Zealand. Welcome, Karen. Thank you for joining us today. Lisa says, be nice to beautiful rich people too, even if you think they have a perfect life. Yeah, sure. I think you just treat everyone with respect, whether they're rich or beautiful or not. And I think I think that's what CV's point was in that as well. But man, it is Aries season. I don't know about you, CV, but I've been really tired the last few weeks, and it's extending out into today with this balsamic moon. I barely got through my astrology of April. Like people were propping me up in the chat box because I was just I hadn't slept. Um, we've just been kind of there's been some extra work in my life lately that has been really taxing, and it's it's a lot to process. CV,
Yeah.
what else are you seeing in this April 1st new moon at 11 degrees of Aries? What are some of your big picture thoughts? I think we've sufficiently gone down the Oscar rabbit hole, right?
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure. You know, I've been thinking about this a lot, right? Like thinking about the pile up that is still like happening in Aquarius. Um, right, because Mars, the ruler of Aries, is sort of still there, right?
Mhm.
And thinking about like I think like all and I'd love you to sort of expand on this, but all year I've been thinking about wherever Aquarius is in our charts, it's like someplace it's getting sort of worked over. It feels like to me the tedious, slow work, whether it be a relationship, your career, like somewhere that's kind of like going like a snail's pace, right? And it's you know getting frustrated with Uranus. And so it's interesting to think about this new moon almost like bringing some life, right? Like I think of like the Aries partner chart is like, okay, like let's get some action going. What's the sort of new way that we're going to look at the world? To me, it just feels like, and again, maybe I'm so biased because for me, like Aries season is really like when I like wake up, but it feels like a moment of rejuvenation.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I think that we have been getting worked over. You and I are both Leo ascendants, so having this stack up in an angular house is I don't know if it's grinding through your life in that way, but uh, it's been a lot to process. So all of you fixed risings out there, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Taurus, are getting an extra special gift from Mars and, and Saturn and the Venus, enclosure. Um, so I do feel like some of the challenges around uh, the Venus, at least the Venus part of it, are starting to abate because Venus is being released and Venus is about to change signs into Pisces, and the Jupiter ruled sign of Pisces into its exaltation. The problem is, though, and I wonder what you think about this, CV, is that we're going to be leaving Mars and Saturn all by their lonesome without Venus help anymore. What do you think about that? That's been worrying me a little bit.
Well, as one of my teachers, Adam Summer, always says, there is no room for fear in astrology.
Maybe a little bit, right? Just for self-preservation, right, Aries?
Yeah, I think I, right? Like it's different, right? Like on the mundane and on the personal level, right? Like I think that Mars can kind of go in there and kind of, I was thinking about Mars as almost like a bit of a rejuvenation.
Mm,
But yeah, but it feels like a little bit of a battle.
yeah.
Like Saturn's like, this is the way, and Mars is like, well, no, actually, let's just break up the structure now. So, not that there's fear, but this just doesn't look, as you would say, a happy part in the chart.
No, it's difficult, and we're going to see the conjunction of Mars and Saturn come shortly after this new moon on the 4th. So there's a number of events that we should maybe go in order with.
Yeah.
So before we do that, let's just give the Virgo people in the audience. There's plenty of them that come to my channel. Let's break down some of the details of this new moon moment first. So we've got the sun and the moon at 11 degrees of Aries. That the second decan of Aries, which is ruled by it's ruled by the sun by face, and the host of the sign in general is Mars that we've been talking about. We have a tarot card associated with Aries II, which is the Three of Wands, which we can break down in a second. Mars, Saturn, and Venus are making a whole sign sextile to the new moon, and Mercury is co-present with the moon and the sun, and about to go into its cazimi of the sun, or make its conjunction about a day later. Jody is making a good point that Mercury is screaming fast right now. It's going to move what Jody said, like 0 to 15 degrees in like a week. So every time, and this is something to understand about the Mercury synodic cycle, is that Mercury moves very, very quickly when it is making its superior direct cazimi conjunction with the sun, right? So it's going very fast when it comes into the heart of sun direct. It's going much slower when it makes its conjunction retrograde, which is called the inferior conjunction. So messages maybe just coming at us, like our minds maybe just going like we're not really stopping to think about things. We're just kind of doing stuff, which I think is important to realize, because some of the divination I did with this, with the I-Ching and things of that nature, do talk about potentially getting in over our head, maybe by being a little bit rash with our actions and getting involved in something that we may not be completely prepared for. I do think it'll work out. There was further divination that we'll unpack that was talking about, hey, it'll probably be okay as long as you're working for the good of the collective. And I wanted to really point that out, because one thing that we have here with this new moon is you always, always, always have to think about what is the host providing for the planets in the lunation. And in this case, Mars is in the second decan of Aquarius, saying, hey, are you going to fight for your ideals? Are you going to do something for the good of the whole or the collective? Are you going to remove limiting belief systems that may have been holding you back? That's what I've been finding with Aquarius in general. A lot of it is really about, can you shape your world, Saturn, through a set of idealistic laws, rules, beliefs, stories, and let go of the ones that aren't serving you, right? Mm-hmm. So we've been going through that period as a collective recently. We're also, during this new moon, you've got Jupiter and Neptune coming together. They're not witnessing, this lunation, but they're happening. So just because it's not witnessing the lunation doesn't mean it's not going on in some other area of your life. It just may not be directly related to the new moon here. So yeah, what I'm trying to formulate my question around this. Let's start talking about the Three of Wands, CV. I'm gonna stop my share. And thank you, Susanna, for the super chat. I really appreciate your support. You're so awesome that you all are so generous with your resources and with your time. And I'm really glad that you're all here today. So let's stop this share for just a second. We'll come back to the chart in a minute. Well, we've got the Three of Wands. Okay. We've got a figure that is looking out into a bay, potentially for his ships to come in, maybe. In the first decan of Aries, we had somebody who was surveying the territory, holding the globe, maybe being like, which place do I want to conquer next? You know, like there's some, when this card was created, they were talking about Dominion, which is one of the names of Aries 1, where there was a comparison to like creating a colony. So like colonialism, which is not my favorite way to think about the card, but sometimes we have to think about the roots of what we're looking at here. So we have someone who's trying to figure out, how do we establish our own territory away from the mother country? And here we've done that work. We've gone to battle. We've had the conquest, and now we're trying to figure out the solar rules that we want to establish. And eventually we get to the Venus ruled decan, where we're trying to establish a following. We're trying to get buy-in from people, right? With Eros. Now there's a daimon associated with this decan called Persephone. So this is, to me, this is a really royal decan. There's royalty associated with this decan. There's a couple fixed stars, Alderman and Alpharets, which are in constellations in the royal family. And there's this like place at the top of the pole where you have constellations that don't rise and set generally. They just kind of appear out of thin air. So they were considered this place of immortality. So you have Cepheus, the king, Cassiopeia, the queen, and Andromeda, the princess. All these constellations are in this specific area. And these fixed stars, Alderman and Alpharets, are one is in Cepheus and the other is in Andromeda. So to me, this decan, this Aries 2, is really about wise leadership, you know, like establishing who and what you believe in rather than the rejection of what you don't. And also potentially, how do you establish the new decrees, right? There's like a saying, hey, this is what we're going to do now. Here's the leadership quality. How do you do that with dignity? I guess that was what I was trying to draw out of my sleepy brain here. You have Mars in this decan. How is this played out in your life and in your personal experience, CV?
You know, it's interesting because when I think of my own Aries placements and Mars placements, okay, I'll give you an example. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I hope this isn't veering too much off. Right? Like, I think there's something, though, even though we get the second decan where there's this idea of like establishing what we value, there's this mission, I think, across the board with Aries, this sort of idea that you have to, like, you're always kind of going on a mission, right? There's a quality to this, to the Aries, I think, that isn't, I mean, it's cardinal, that always needs something to sort of like champion, right? Like, right. So even if the Three of Wands, it's like, okay, like, where to next, right? I think that's part of it. It's not just kind of like, okay, let me sit here and just chill like with my three wands. It's kind of like, what's the next thing?
Right.
And so it's funny because I do freelance work because I think that my own, like, I always, like, I feel like I'm very conflict driven. I always have to have something to work on. Like, I think I've never had like a 9 to 5 job in my life because
Yeah.
I've, well, also the attention span. And so I realized that if I'm not working on something, I can get like really like feisty, like with my partner, or just like kind of like be dramatic. And I
Yeah.
was thinking about this Aries season. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go. And I'm like, I was like, universe, like I'm ready for a new writing project. And like one fell into my lap. And I'm like, okay, like I'm a very satisfied Aries. I have something to work on. It's a
Yeah.
thing. I'll do it. I'll complete it. It's a thing that's important to me. Maybe I'll go on to the third decan and I'll convince people why they should like this thing, and then I'll move on. So I feel like that three of wands is sort of, even if it is more stable, it's
Mhm.
constantly always like, okay, but what next? Like it doesn't.
Yeah. One of the things that you said really resonated with my experience of the Orphic hymn of Mars.
Yeah.
So in my own relationship with astrology and the planets and the deities, I do I recite the Orphic hymn to each planet of the specific day. And when we get to Tuesday, which is Mars Day, you talk about being able to turn, you're praying to Ares or Mars to turn the weapons of war into plowshares, into tools to work the fields, right? To do something productive with that energy. And that's exactly what you were describing, like where you were saying, if I don't have something to conquer, I think I don't think we don't have to shy away from that word. I think sometimes we want to be able to assert our will and our dominance over something. It doesn't have to be like we don't have to oppress somebody to do that, but we can like achieve something through having that martial energy go somewhere productive. And
Something to champion, if you will.
champion, there you go. I like that. Something to champion. So you see, it's all in the nuance of the word, isn't it? Like I love this with your Gemini moon here, like finding the right word to say. So yeah, so I guess I would tell the audience here today, this new moon may be about what are you going to champion? What new goal do you want to establish where you can direct your energy and maybe even some of your frustration? Because Aquarius has a lot of frustration built into its structure. And as Mars is going to start moving into the third decan of Aquarius, that some of that frustration may come to a boiling point where we say, I just can't live like this anymore. So I'm going to have to establish this new project, this new area, this new something, and leave behind this old thing that wasn't serving me anymore. Right. So I am with you on that. That I really like hearing your experience with that. I like the saying, if you keep the drama in your art, you'll keep it out of your life too, which I found to be true. Because I get antsy too. Like my Leo rising is in the Mars real decan, so I'm just kind of like, "Argh." Sometimes I get like, I'll just, you know, sometimes when my partner's working from home, I'll just like be like poking them, like I'm just bored, just give me something to do, like I think that's the vibe, right? It's just like, fuck, just give me something to do, like I think,
Like
right?
my partner will be like, "You're so dramatic," and then I think about it. I'm like, maybe I am. I just need to focus that somewhere because I will
Right.
cause drama if I'm not expelling that energy with some sort of cause or something I'm working on.
Yeah, my daughter has Mars in the same decan I think that you do, and she's the same way. Like sometimes if she's having some drama in her personal life, I'm like, are you working on your art? Are you writing your songs? Are you drawing? Like, just here, go do this. Go lift some weights or something. Like go lift something heavy. But yeah, and yeah, I've had this really great discussion with another friend of mine where they were utilizing those skills in like a culinary aspect. So they were directing that energy in a culinary way, and I thought that I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's such a great expression of that martial energy. The cutting, yeah, cutting and fire, all of those things. So maybe if you have too much energy at this new moon, pick a project, maybe have something physical, cook something, draw something, chop some wood. Like, I don't know what century we're in anymore, but that's my dream, like living out like some, rural area, chopping wood in my flannel, chewing on a piece of hay or something. Um, anyway, sorry, we're getting silly.
Well, I love that. And just kind of going back to the original question of like, okay, Mars and Saturn by themselves. And while obviously this isn't uncomfortable, I think it's important to remember that, like, the sky or the universe in general, like, while there are moments that we are no doubt intensely uncomfortable for humans, right?
Mhm.
Or any being really,
Yeah.
um that, like, the sky's not there to punish us. And so I was thinking about this Mars Saturn conversation, with Mars of course ruling this, Aries conversation, is almost like a really aggressive check-in with Saturn, right?
Mm.
Like Saturn's been going through this like slow pace and like trying to get this, if you say like, you know maybe, get this statement of values together. Or even I think of like Saturn as like, okay, like what's the new vision, what are we honing in on? It's going super slow, we're all kind of feeling frustrated, and Mars is like, okay, now it's time to act. Like it's kind of like,
Yeah.
come on, like let's put some breath into here, we're gonna spark the life in this. And like
Yeah.
that can, like, that could kind of be very uncomfortable, but ultimately, right, like I think it could be, it has a potential for being one of those transits that you look back and go, oh, God, that was terrible, but my whole life changed.
Yes, absolutely. And very much my own lived experience right now,
Yeah.
where there's something going on in my life where I have to take a lot of actions.
Mhm.
It's a slow, tedious process that you have to, like, I think that's one point that you were making that I wanted to add to the conversation, is that the host of this Aries lunation is in a Saturn sign. So it's actually probably going to require us to slow down just a little bit and like make sure that we're, crossing all the T's, dotting the I's, taking it one step at a time. And that could lead to some frustration at this new moon too, where we're saying, wow, this is a big life changing project. And we kind of have to really make sure that we're really understand what we're all getting into. And I think that that could be something with this new moon too, because we have this Jupiter, Neptune, Jupiter, Venus energy that's going to be coming, and that's at that eclipse at the end of the month, right? Where we have this grandiose vision, this super idealistic 10 of cups rainbow happily ever after vision. And in Aries season, it's probably really easy to just do stuff and you're not thinking about it. You're just like, all right, I'm just gonna go for it. And that can lead to some unexpected consequences sometimes, right? Has this happened with you in your Aries placements?
Absolutely. I think it's taken me, and that's another thing, right? Like Aries energy. I once had a client, this is interesting. It can go two ways. And he referred to himself, he was also like Aries sun, lots of Aries placements, as the frog, right? Like he happened to be in a day trader at one point in his life. And there's this thing with Aries of like, when to act and you just go for it, right? And
Mm,
that can be awesome, but it can also like get you into trouble.
yeah.
Um, so like I'm the kind of person, like, anecdotally, right? Like I feel like Aries energy is like, sometimes if it doesn't have somebody to slow it down, it could be like, I'm gonna get in my car and like drive across the country tomorrow. Like,
Which you've done.
which I've done. Or like I have been hit in the head, just to share with everyone, more than like I've had like hit in the head more than many people.
Yeah.
So there is that, literally like that head first, like let's go for it. And like that can be good in some circumstances, but also it can be completely dangerous and detrimental. And so maybe there's this moment of like, okay, like, Saturn kind of all forcing us to slow down could long term be a good thing.
Yes. Yes. That's the balancing part to this energy, right? Is being a little bit more deliberate rather than just, having the straight impulsive energy of Aries. So I do think that this Aries new moon is a really positive start, but I do think that its effects are going to have long range consequences, especially because we're coming up on eclipse season. So just be very careful about your impulsivity and how you are going about things, and take some time to breathe every once in a while, right? All right, Stevie, I'm going to look in the chat here. We've got Unity Jackson joining us from Seoul. Welcome. We've got a new a new person in the chat here. Welcome. I'm so excited to finally catch you live. Well, I'm excited that you are here, Unity. We all need a little bit of that right now. Remco says that the Thoth Tarot calls Three of Wands virtue. Yeah, I like the name for that, Remco. And he's saying that Lord of Established Strength is another word from, I believe that's from the book of book T. So virtue, yeah, when we establish a goal, a territory, a world, we need to figure out how are we going to base the management of it. So I think the sun, and this being a sun decan, the exaltation degree of the sun is in this decan. This is really about like, how are you going to administrate power? Like, what are you going to do when you're given great power, right? This is like Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility. And if you don't realize that the repercussions on other people around you, which sometimes is a criticism for Aries, is like the subjective perspective, which fair or not, I mean, talking with you seem to have a compassionate, empathetic side to you, but you have Mercury and Pisces, so I don't know if that helps or.
I think the thing with Aries, and I've met like other Aries, is that it's not that I think they can just be really like the sign can be really unaware,
Yeah.
right? Like you're constantly like going after things that you don't always like in a way like slow down for Libra. Like you kind of assume like other people can take care of themselves too.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And
No,
so
it does. It does.
uninitiated Aries can totally be just like selfish and all of those things, but I think there is just a level of like, again, it's not about hurting other people, it's about just like going towards the thing you want.
Yeah, being singularly focused on that goal, right? In that kind of like arrow Mars way.
Yeah, and just assuming again, people around you like, oh, you can take care of yourself too, right? And like unlike
Right.
like, how are you doing? I don't have time for that.
Yeah, so I mean, some of it is coming from their strength in being able to be independent, and then, like you said, like assuming that others are also able to do that, which isn't always the case. I've learned that.
A long time to figure that out.
100%.
Work. Oh.
Yeah. Andrea says energy of 3 is creation. So in Wands, I see is creating as new. I always see as creating new, daily, sunrise, sunset, new opportunity. Okay, sorry, I'm digesting that. So we're creating new opportunities here with the sun. I agree. Remco is agreeing with that. Raven is giving Andrea the high five. Says yes, still Remco is still a small number, and since it is fire, it is super fast and bursting like a great idea. Yeah, Mercury is just screaming through Aries right now. Susanna's asking, Spencer, what was the tarot card of the Aquarius decan 3? You mentioned it. 4 of Swords, question mark? Yeah, so when we're going to be getting to some of the Aquarius things here in a second, but the tarot cards associated with Aquarius are the 5, 6, and 7 of Swords. So what we have here, I think I'll find the 6 of Swords because that's where Mars is exactly on the new moon, but it's going to be moving very quickly into the 3rd decan and meeting up with Saturn. So here's the 6 of Swords, which is a crossing. So this may be the time where we're initiating action to move from one state of consciousness to another. So I really think that's important with this new moon. This is really about establishing a safe passage from one chapter of our life to the next, because a lot of the times they think of those eclipses as chapters, chapter markers, endings, beginnings. And I gotta tell you, I am really excited about that eclipse at the end of April. I think it's going to be a benefic event. Okay. Even though eclipses are generally not always nice, I just think there's a lot of good things going on with the Jupiter Venus conjunction happening that's hosting the Taurus eclipse, right? Pretty juicy, right? What do you think about that?
No, I love that because I just always like with eclipses, I'm always like, I'm at your mercy, universe. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, they definitely are wild cards. So, we'll see we'll see what it brings. Again, it's not a crystal charging lunation with the eclipses. Maybe you can do that with this new moon in Aries, but be careful what you wish for on some level as well. Taking a look here. So the third decan, Susanna, just to give you some context, when we get to the Mars Saturn conjunction, is the Seven of Swords, where we're finally just completely leaving the past behind, untying the karmic knots. The second decan of Aquarius is more about communicating back and forth between the established order and the periphery, the old and the new. That's a Mercury decan, so there's kind of this back and forth between the past and the future, or between worlds. And then finally, in the third decan of Aquarius, we're finally just like, okay, we're leaving it behind. We're going off into the unknown, into the west or whatever, right? Andrea says, Spencer, I love that. Doing some action, cooking, chopping action. Yeah, it's give your Mars something to do at this new moon. Okay, this is my biggest advice for you. Just do something with your hands, like do something with your mind. The sun also is representative of the spirit and the head and the intellect. I think that a lot of the times Aries get bad raps about this brutishness, where many Aries display extreme intelligence, like because of the exaltation of the sun there. And in astrology, traditional astrology, the sun being associated with the intellect just as much as Mercury. Mercury more about the delivery of it rather than the actual insights themselves. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I was thinking like this could be a time to like get into martial arts.
Yeah.
Utilizes the intellect and the physical as well.
I'm thinking about like Joseph Campbell was an Aries sun in this. I believe he had his sun in this decan, and he just like had this mind that was just very expansive about like myth and things like that. And I don't know. I think he's not a perfect figure either historically, but he talked a lot about the monomyth and the hero's journey and things of that nature. So just one example of a person using that martial energy towards the intellect. Raven says the action of Mars and finding a way to express it in a productive way is very important. I have Mars in Virgo in the 5th, and I make block prints and do a lot of detailed carving. Yeah, I have Mars in Virgo myself, and I like working on little tiny things. You can see behind me, I have bonsai trees. So I use Mars to cut these tiny little trees and pay attention to all the little details and things like that. So yeah, give your Mars something to do. Okay. Yeah, Susanna says she has her Mars at 21 Aquarius. Well, your Mars is right on my descendant, so that's awesome. So untie those karmic knots, Susanna. Leave the past behind. Utilize that frustration to be able to make a new start rather than... I've seen clients with that position. They get so frustrated with the situation, but they will put up with it longer than they should. Does that make sense?
This is
Mars in Aquarius 3.
Okay, yeah.
So there may be something that you have to just finally move on from with that position there, Andrea. Susanna, sorry. Andrea, thank you for the super chat and your little fox emoji. Remco, thank you for your super chat and your little martial arts fox that we have here. It's adorable. So I that's a good... do you all get to pick which sticker goes in there? Because it's funny to me though. Henry says, Sun in Aries is very center mind. But it's with Chiron too, so prepare for the teaching path. Spencer, that's amazing that you do bonsai. Yeah, bonsai is so much fun. Claire, Aligning Light Astrology, is here. Claire Moon, Dr. Claire Moon, PhD, is here saying, I love bonsai. That's perfect for Mars and Virgo. It is perfect for Mars and Virgo. It's such a relaxing hobby. I really dig it. Raven says, yes, Virgo Mars, detailed working with the hands, 100%. All right, CV. Should we go back to the chart here? How are you doing?
Yeah, I just was thinking to myself how I respect all of my friends with Virgo placements because I have absolutely no patience for details.
Right.
Like I'm thinking next time someone gives me a bonsai tree, I know who I'm giving it to.
Well, good. Yeah, I'll take it. I love doing it. Um, well, and that's why I like talking with you sometimes is we have a complementary style. I think that I'll get into the nitty gritty and you'll be able to use your intuition to pull it back out to a big picture viewpoint. So
Mass gesture.
that's right. Exactly. Okay. So I think that we have, for the most part, broken down this specific April 1st event. Um, if I move forward and I want to take you through just to the full moon and just talk a little bit about some of the things that are going to unfold during this full moon. So on the next day, we are having the Cazimi between Mercury and the Sun. So you can see here that they're kind of Mercury and the Sun are coming together at about 13 degrees of Aries, okay, which is on a fixed star called Alderaan. There it is right there. Now, Alderaan, that's in Cepheus the King, talking about the dignity and things like that. So I guess, how do we communicate our new sovereignty, right? Our new independence in a way that is fair, that is establishing good, benevolent governance rather than authoritarian autocracy, right? Like you got to be careful with this of saying, well, I said it, and like that's the way it's going to be. You know? Have you ever had one of those moments, CV? So I like to say about this kind of thing because I've had a lot of humbling around that type of energy. I think Leo ascendants in general tend to be like, I have decreed it, and that is the way it is going to be. Screw you. And with the Sun ruling my first house in the 12th, oftentimes that energy doesn't work out very well for me. So I've had to learn to like swallow my pride many times and be like, oh, okay. Like, I have to like, what is your viewpoint? Like, let's come to a compromise. So I like to say about this type of energy is that you can choose to be that way for a period of time. But what you're doing is you're planting the seed of your own demise through your own hubris, right? I think that what I've learned from, traditional Chinese philosophy is that when you go to an extreme, you're planting the seed of its opposite, right? And you try to assert too much dominance or power in a situation. What you're doing is creating resentment. Whereas if you're sharing power, or if you're benevolent and you're treating people with the respect that they deserve, your authority will be respected. Does that make sense? So how can you establish respectable authority in whatever area of life that you're working with at this new moon, rather than creating a situation of conflict that eventually will make your time in the position of power temporary, right? Because it's like, oh, well, you can establish that dominance for a short period of time, but then you will be usurped, right? Because of your mistreatment of others. So, and I think we're going through this as a culture right now. The Aries Aquarius placements here, where we're saying, how can we equally and fairly distribute power, resources, wealth, and treat people with respect, so that we can get along in harmony without having to plant the seeds of like unrest and things like that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
I
yeah, go ahead.
No, it's interesting because I think of like when I think of Aries, I keep thinking of like Mercury here too, like in respect to communication, right? Like it's like a sword. Like you can, if you use it consciously, right? Correctly, you can cut through and protect, right? Get
Yeah.
rid of that which isn't, again, you're standing in defense of something, but you can just as easily, right? Like trip up and, start taking out people.
Yes.
Literally cut people. So it's like be careful what you cut, right? Which, coming back to maybe finding a way to expel that energy. Are you cutting people, or are you cutting problems, or are you?
Oh, I like that. I like that. And also, if you're running too fast with a giant sword in your hand, you could trip over a rock and impale yourself, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I love that though. Cutting people or cutting problems. Yeah, direct it towards something. Just give it that work. It really brings it back to just giving that energy somewhere to go and something to do. And this is true if you are. This is something that I've learned as a parent: is just give your young, energetic toddler or teenager something to do, and they will be much less destructive. Like, you give them a piece of paper and a crayon, they're probably going to draw something, there instead of on the walls of your living room, right? So it's like creating the structures within that you want to direct that energy in some level. Okay, so we've got the Mercury Cazimi, the renewal of Mercury. Mercury's moving screaming fast. We probably are receiving messages and impulses from the divine around this period of time on how we can establish our own sovereignty, establish our own independence. And then when we move forward, I'm going to move this down here. When we move forward to the 4th, that's when we have the coming together of Mars and Saturn. Do you have any thoughts about Mars and Saturn coming together here? Because this seems like a big moment, especially on the global stage.
Yeah, I feel like, how should I say this? Again, my Mercury and Pisces. It feels like a very like a moment where things come undone,
Hmm.
right? So like it feels like this feels like, again, whether it's a certain amount of order or something that's sort of happening with Saturn, or something that's been kind of going steady. In Mars is kind of just like, we could say, waking up or like fucking shit up.
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
it it feels like a very sort of explosive moment. Um,
Yeah, it's two malefics coming together, right? And I'm getting just kind of a vibe of like a, you know, gas pedal brake type of thing.
yeah,
Um, frustration is the word that just keeps coming up in my mind, where we want to move forward, but Saturn is saying, but here's this reality check. Here's this brake that this emergency brake we have to pull.
yeah, yeah.
Um, the other thing that we haven't really touched on with this is that all of these planets in Aquarius have been going through what's called the north bending of the nodes, which in my experience, that's a big turning point.
Hmm.
And we've been going through so much change lately because all these planets are going through these turning points. And I've been making the point to point out to people that each of those planets represents a different two topics in your life.
Yep.
So we had Venus that recently was representing the Taurus and Libra area of your life. Then we have Mars that is going to be hitting the bending of the nodes here on the 5th, that is representing the Aries and Scorpio area of your life. And then roughly, a few days after that, Saturn's going to do that as well. Saturn's going to go through that changing of the guard and that turning point. So I guess what I would say is be gentle with yourself with all these changes. On the global scale, Jupiter and Neptune are coming together around this period of time as well. And generally, that has been associated with peace or with nations coming together. Here's what I hope, CV, and because I've been looking at the other big elephant in the room that we haven't really talked about is the continuing conflict in Ukraine and with Russia and things of that nature. And this Mars Saturn conjunction is coming together opposite Vladimir Putin's Pluto, and also according to some charts, exactly on Russia's descendant. Um, so my hope is that signals an ending to that conflict with Jupiter and Neptune coming together, historically representing peace treaties. Um, I think there are other possibilities. But I'm hoping for the peaceful one. Any thoughts on that ongoing situation?
I mean, I think it's to specifically, I don't necessarily feel like equipped enough to talk about it, but I do think what you said about Mars Saturn being a turning point is completely spot on, right? I love this, like, there's this frustrating moment and something's about to flip.
Yeah.
But I also kind of see this still, the Neptune stuff, Neptune Jupiter is a little bit of like, it feels like disinformation, right? Like, I don't know. I hope, right? Like, I hope it means peace. But I also feel there's a bit of like, there's this kind of backdrop of like these like super reality happening. And then kind of like everyone's like, but what is truth? There's
Yeah.
a bit of like,
Well, I think it could be a peaceful resolution, or it could be nations banding together because of a really bad event, you know. Like I said, I hope it's the first one rather than the
and
latter,
yeah.
right? So, but I could see that being a way it would play out too. But I really do believe that one way or the other, Jupiter Neptune, it talks about a unification of purpose, you know. And we had a long talk. I had a talk with this other astrologer, Hannah Kuhari.
Mhm.
We were bringing up that there are historical peace treaties that happen at various Jupiter Neptune conjunctions. Jupiter being the planet of peace, actually, the one that brings order and peace back to the realm. But you're right, like with Neptune being involved, it could be an illusion. You know, it could be something that is uh, fabricated. I don't know, like something to consider also. So, okay, so we've got that. This is going to happen in the midst of this lunation, this Mars Saturn conjunction that's happening here. And as we continue to roll on through this lunar cycle, we're going to have during this April 5th time, the moon is also going to be out of bounds from April 5th to April the 10th. Now, moon was out of bounds last week too, like from I think the middle of last week till the middle of the weekend, most recently, which can create some heightened emotional experiences. I know that I definitely had a rough week last week emotionally, and I think that it's easy for us to go to these extremes when the moon is out of bounds, right? What do you think about the moon being out of bounds here, and how do we best handle that?
I'm probably not the person to ask.
Right.
I'm like, my life, like, because sometimes there'll be like these moments, these transits, and people are talking about. I'm like, my life is an emotional experience, so it's really hard to like qualitatively like understand.
Do you have any out of bounds planets actually?
I did look this up the other day.
Yeah.
I d Is my moon out of bounds? I can't. Or I have something out of bounds.
Yeah.
My life just feels out of bounds, but
You're like my whole life is out of bounds. That's right.
and
Uh,
I just love the fact that the out of bounds moon is, of course, the Gemini moon, which is like the sort of distracted, already a bit out of bounds moon.
right. So maybe this is leading to too many options, right? Just feeling that we just have these crazy options that we're going to, and I would think that this might be, yeah, your moon's not quite out of bounds. It's really far above the ecliptic, but not quite out of bounds there. But what I will say is that as a collective, we may be exploring possibilities that are far ranging than we would normally explore, right? Because the moon is not beholden to the sun anymore with this, out of bounds basically means that the planet is moving outside the normal path of the sun, which it was in traditional astrology was considered the authority. So it's kind of like all the shackles are off with the moon and it can just kind of do whatever it needs to do. Um, so I think that we have the moon representing the body, emotions, intuition, but also changeability. So a lot of changes can happen really quickly. So try to center yourself for these 5 days and recognize that you might have some wild swings that may be a little bit destabilizing.
It's just ruled by, because it's in, Mercury, sorry, Gemini ruled by that Mercury and Aries. This feels like a moment where maybe we're getting like changes happening. It feels like the like the television is just changing channels way too quickly and we can't keep up.
Yes, yeah. It does feel like we've been given a lot of information just coming at us all at once, doesn't it? With all of the just everything that we're going through collectively and with all of the planets at the bending of the nodes and all of this kind of thing. Yeah, it's a lot to process. Tanya Gerardo says, isn't Deneb Algety near where Saturn and Mars will be? If so, how does this star flavor those planets?
Mm.
That's a good observation, Tanya. And yes, that is near that particular fixed star. I will say that that Saturn Mars conjunction is actually slightly closer to a fixed star called Sa del Sud. They're in really similar areas. So Sa del Sud was called the luckiest of the lucky.
Mm.
So that's about creating luck through synchronicity. So being in the right place at the right time. So maybe there is something that happens around that period of time by allowing things in your life to happen without having to force it. Now with Deneb Elgeti is like the tail. It's like the tail of Capricorn. So that one has some associations with law, with like establishment of law. So maybe we're establishing some kind of new social order around that period of time as well, if you want to bring Deneb Algety into the equation as well. So a great observation. That's why we have such a wonderful community here. Thank you for bringing that into our attention as well. You can also see in this chart that Venus is dipped into Pisces on the 5th as well, which for some is like a, oh yay, hooray, Venus is in its exaltation in Pisces. For others, it might be, oh no, Venus isn't helping Saturn and Mars anymore, right? So we've got the eight of cups here for that decan of Venus, CV. What's been your experience with that card and with that decan? And here we go. You can see that figure going off into the distance.
Well, we talked about this at length when Jupiter moved into that decan. I remember we
Mhm.
had conversations, and I'm actually remembering last year when Jupiter first ingressed there. And it's interesting because there's, of course, this idea of leaving something behind. And it's interesting because, like, Jupiter has now been in this space for a while and has passed through that decan. But thinking about it is like, I think the way you described it is almost like a tease because it's like in that first decan, you're like, okay, like, ugh, like you realize you're kind of over something. You're like, I
Yeah.
want something new. I don't quite know what it is, but I know that I'm just like over this like way I've been doing things to some extent. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's like the dissatisfaction with the material reality that you've created, so that you're going off in search of some kind of higher purpose or meaning. And maybe with Venus here, it may be an object of desire that we've been pursuing, that we're just like, you know what, we don't actually want this. Like, we're just going to go off and leave this behind, maybe to find what is truly meaningful for us, not necessarily what we've been doing this whole entire time. So eventually you'll find it. You'll find what's really meaningful for you as Venus goes through the decans of Pisces, and it eventually comes into a conjunction with Jupiter on April the 30th, which is crazy. It's super powerful at Venus's exaltation degree. That's just, like I said, that's as good as Venus gets. So allow yourself to release what isn't serving you anymore. If there's something that's just truly not bringing you happiness, be willing to go off and envision something better or higher. And it may not necessarily even be a material thing. It could be just a value that you have, right? It doesn't. Sometimes that's when we come back to like our Hollywood actors that we were talking about. Like, even though they're going back to their multi-million-dollar mansions, that doesn't necessarily guarantee their happiness moving forward. Maybe they don't want to be in the spotlight or something like that. There's a lot of people that feel the downsides of fame and fortune as well, right?
Absolutely. Overall, this Venus placement feels like a continuing story from the lunation, and that the in the Aries new moon we get this sort of birth of like, okay, like this part of this Aquarius part of our charts has been worked over for a while, and you still have Saturn and Mars sort of battling it out. And within sort of this, there is this sort of new idea that's sort of born with Aries, right? This like, okay, like what is the new mission, right? We could
Right.
say coming out. It feels like a rebirth kind of for this Aquarius moment. And then now, like now, part of it is like, okay, we have the new mission in a sense, or what's the thing we're on to? But then part of that is like Venus is like, okay, like it's kind of like this subplot of like now we have to like let something go to like bring something in.
Yeah, yeah, I like that.
Feels like parallel stories.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it, parallel stories, because it's just really not going to be witnessing
Mm-mm.
any of the Aries stuff anymore, or the Aquarius stuff.
Yeah.
So you've got the, all that Pisces energy is going on with, just in its own area of your life, without bearing any testimony to these other planets, which sometimes can be good, but other times it can be like, oh, well, it can feel like we're juggling multiple lives that aren't necessarily cooperating with one another. And that can be a little bit of a frustrating experience as well.
Absolutely. Just not specifics, but it feels like in everyone's life I've encountered, my own life, and I wonder if you could say the same, again, not specifics. It feels like there's a place in our life where things are very challenging and there's a certain story that's unfolding, but then there's also like, oh, this thing that tends to be working out for us, perhaps, or getting, I hate saying Jupiter's always like working out for us because sometimes Jupiter can just be highlighting a situation, but it does seem like there is parallel. We've all sort of had these parallel stories in our lives, and this Venus is going to be adding to the plot of the second one.
Yeah, I think anytime you're trying to achieve an ideal, a dream, something that, is a long cherished thing in your life, there can come that can bring up other challenges and other repressed things that may have been blocking that manifestation, even through just our belief systems,
Mm,
right? Through just saying, well, I could never have that, or I could never achieve that, or I can never be that. um, and I think that when we're making a significant change that I think we are all going through right now, this is sort of a cocoon hatching moment, I feel.
mm-hmm.
um, it's going to bring up some self-doubt. It's going to bring up maybe even some interpersonal issues that need to be worked out if you're doing something like that with someone else as well. And that the way that I've been dealing with that kind of thing is saying, you know what, is this thing important to me? Yes. Do I have another choice? Not really. Am I completely prepared for what it is? No. But we just have to kind of do it. And it's kind of this thing where, you know, I'm potentially making some shifts with my living situation. So that's what I can say about it. If people are like, oh, he's being really vague about it. And for those of you who know about cancers, someone's living situation is it's very important to a Cancerian, and it can be really stressful trying to figure out all the ins and outs of that. And I'm tired, y'all. it's a full-time job trying to uh, establish that type of thing. So that's what I'll say. Um, but again, you have to kind of take the leap every once in a while, right? And this is why I appreciate talking to my Aries friends, because a lot of the time the Cancerian caution will stop you from taking a risk. And when you have that Aries energy, that's the type of energy that just says, just fucking do it. You can worry about it later, like, right? And you've pretty much said that to me sometimes. It's like, just fucking do it and you can figure it out. You'll be fine. Like, and I've had other Aries friends who just be like this one. Instead of hemming and hawing over it for ages, sometimes you just have to kind of make that push and then figure it out. And yes, you might get a bump on the head. And yes, hopefully you won't impale yourself on the sword, because that's, you don't want that. But where there's a will, there's a way, right?
Absolutely. I love, yeah, I just, overall thinking about, and again, about this lunation, I keep thinking about like a turning point, like Mars being there to like push the narrative forward in a way that maybe there's we're all kind of being forced to make decisions. I think going back to what you said earlier about I've been thinking in the mundane, right? There's going to be a almost like that crisis point when with Mars is like, oh no, we have to go, even though Saturn's trying really hard to put the brakes on.
Yeah. Yeah. And we just have to be really conscientious. I think that's the thing to keep in mind. I'm looking at the chat. Tarja T is joining us from Finland. We've got the two Tarjas, the two terrific Tarjas that are transporting their terrific, what is a T word for messages?
To
Cross continent, they're what?
I just I was torrent
Transmitting their torrents of
T-Rex.
Sorry, what happens when I get punchy. Welcome, Tarja, and Tarja is doing her own new moon ritual for their astrology group. So I'm glad that you were able to join us, even if it was a little late. That's okay, no worries. We're not really working with linear time right now today, anyway. So you're in the right place. That's right. What is time? Andrea says, thinking of Venus searching for true value, beauty, and fulfillment in that Eight of Cups, enjoying the cups and find what that fine wine she will, with what fine wine she will fill them. Yeah, exactly. Like let's figure out what we can find the sense of fulfillment. But first we have to empty those cups out if we want to put something good in them, right? If you've got just this old rotten mead or something, you might have to dump that out first and then find the transmission. There you go. Remco's helping us out after the fact here. Gotcha. I've got a 30-second delay, so you probably had a better idea while I was searching for it. All right, CV, CT. No, you're CV. Too many T's. So I've covered the Venus in Pisces. We've talked a little bit about Mars being at the bending of the nodes. A couple days after that, Mercury and Saturn are going to sextile, as well as Mars and Mercury sextiling. So maybe some help from Mercury along the way. And T-Rex transmission. Yes. Let's talk just a little bit briefly about the first quarter moon, and then we'll wrap this thing up.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your patience. You are the most patient Aries friend that I have.
It's because my Mercury is in Pisces, and I'm just half of me is just swimming behind you. So.
And you also you have a Taurus Venus too, right? Mm-hmm. That probably helps. I'm sure. Okay. Claire says, "Man, letting go is hard. Hoping Pisces pool party will help me let go and not just leave me deluded for another month." Yeah. I want a pool party. I miss pool parties. Like, that's what we all need right now. A relaxing pool.
That phrase. So good.
Yeah, the Piscean pool party. I love the alliteration we have on the show today. Rachel says, "I think this sounds like an interesting lunar cycle. I'm emptying the cup in the emptying cups phase already, it seems." Yeah, me too, Tarja. And sometimes we can feel drained when we're emptying all the cups of all the old things that have been holding us back potentially. That a lot of them are just internal. One of the things that I do in my morning prayers is I actually like working with Ganesh a little bit. And Ganesh is a remover of obstacles. And I always pray to Ganesh and I say, "Ganesh, please remove any obstacles that are external in the path, but also that ones that are internally generated." And that's kind of some of the things we're going through here too, is as much as you may want to rage against something outside of yourself, it's equally important to come to terms, acceptance, remove, compost any old narratives that may be stopping you from taking external action. That's why these things are so related, right? So related, like as within, so without, as above, so below, because we really, if we're not in alignment with our vision, there's no way we can take, well thought out action on this externally, right?
Absolutely.
So come into alignment with your vision. So we're looking here at the first quarter phase, when we have the sun at the degree of exaltation, 19 degrees of Aries, and the moon in her own domicile in Cancer. What do you think about this first quarter phase? What kind of challenge are we dealing with here, CV?
I'm just, my first thought is like, this just feels very just high motion emotions. Just, I mean, obviously like the moon but I feel like the sun in Aries has its own sort of like, can have its own sort of drama, and then the moon sort of feels like a lot of crying.
This is the crying aspect.
The
I
crying aspect
know
where we sort
there,
of
right?
start to like release everything we've been thinking about and
The
getting
crying game, right?
about letting go of all those cups.
I've just got that what was that Boy George song going through my head. I know all there is to know about the crying game. The crying game. It's just like, so let the tears flow. I think that what I do like about this first quarter, and I don't know if I ever like squares with the moon and the sun,
Yeah.
but both the planets, both of the luminaries, the sun and the moon, are in places that they really have a lot of strength. So I think that we may be able to establish our sense of personal sovereignty, but we have to take into consideration, how are we going to nurture that new state that we've created, right? That new independence. What is going to support it emotionally, physically? What resources are we going to have to tap into to bring it into fruition and to sustain it over time? Because you were talking about, like, we talk about Aries energy, it's great for like the first push, but how do you sustain that project, that energy, that enthusiasm over time, right? How do you nurture it into a fully fledged thing? So whatever you started at the new moon in Aries, at this point in the cycle on April 9th or so, you may have to protect what you've started too. The second decan of Cancer, which my sun is in, is all about creating a healthy boundary, to like a greenhouse, to protect a small plant that wants to grow. And how do you to keep that project moving forward? How do you create a healthy environment for growth, and protect it against the wolves that could come in, or the pests that could come in and eat it before it's strong enough to resist, right? So this may be the testing point of, how are you going to protect your goal? How are you going to allow it to become established and make it come to full fruition at that full moon, right?
I also feel like it's the way that, like, my crying game comment wasn't just because it's the moon in Cancer, but it feels also maybe like it's excuse me, like this the squaring moon, right? Like we're kind of like building something, but that there might be like it's also a time to remind ourselves that, like, to stay patient, right? Because I always think of like Aries being the impatient crybaby, where like the moon and can like, and so it feels like this could also be a moment where we're getting anxious that the things aren't happening quick enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so reminding ourselves to protect it, but is also reminding ourselves, like, okay, like, stay the course.
Yeah. 100%. Like, this is always a crisis of either consciousness or an external action.
Yeah.
So in the first quarter, Demetra George compares this point in the phase to a crisis of bringing something into form, So, and when the last quarter, we're saying, oh, well, how do we release everything from the previous cycle? Okay, a crisis of consciousness. Okay, the next day, CV, we've got Mercury squaring Pluto. So this may be also part of the crying game that we're experiencing, is having a difficult conversation potentially with the system, with the bureaucratic system, with people and authority figures, which are represented by Capricorn 3. Third decan of Aries, though, is Eros ruled, and it's Venus ruled. So it's kind of about winning someone over, right? The one thing I like to point out about Eros, CV, is that there's gold-tipped arrows that inflame passions, but there's also lead-tipped arrows that they have that can completely repel the object of desire. And I think it's really important, if you have Mercury or any planet in this decan, to be aware of what type of energy your charisma is producing. Are you becoming the attractive pheromone, that's winning someone over to your side, or is your expression repelling something, sort of like a skunk energy, right?
Oh.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I love that. And again, it goes with the sort of double-edged sword
Yeah,
Mars concept, right? You can
totally.
either it's, be pleasing or completely cutting.
Yeah. I guess my advice for this aspect is just try to use maybe even a sense of humor. Um, you're going to catch some more flies with honey than maybe with vinegar potentially. I know that's a cliched little aphorism, but I found that most of the time it works. But there may be some difficult conversations that have to happen between you and somebody potentially in a position of authority that may be managing resources as well.
It also kind of feels to me like with the Mars square Pluto that perhaps this is a day to, right, like be careful with your words, right?
Yes.
Like with the Pluto, like you might be compelled to get in a fight and speak your sort of deepest, right, like Plutonian words at someone without
Yeah.
thinking about it vis-a-vis Aries,
Yeah.
and have to suffer a bit of the underworld before and afterwards.
Yes. So definitely an eruption of feelings that have been repressed for a long time. So be aware that may be coming. Yeah, I'm just picturing Hades erupting from the underworld and to abduct Persephone, and like just
Yeah.
this violent volcanic eruption, right? So okay, let's keep going. You doing good?
Yeah.
Okay. If we look at that same day after the square to Pluto perfects, Mercury is going to be moving into Taurus. So this is something where we're going to see, maybe after this really difficult conversation, maybe that helps us reestablish a sense of maybe peace. Maybe we are able to slow down a little bit. There it is. Okay. Maybe after we have a difficult conversation with the bureaucratic authority, we're asking some questions about what resources do we have, and what are we going to, how are we going to scare up the resources to move forward with our plan and our project, right? That's the first decan of Taurus, is sort of that planning phase. That's the five of Pentacles, right? Where the two figures are outside of the church and they're like, they've fallen on hard times. I think more of that card, though, it's not that you'll be poor. It's just that you've got the worry that you might not have enough, and that sets you off into trying to prepare materially for the future.
Yeah, it's funny, like shorthand, when you said that, my immediate thought was a little different. I was thinking that Mercury in Aries, right? Like shouting out its Plutonian feelings uncensored, and then moving into Taurus, like, what the fuck? Now I have to face the
Ooh,
consequences
yeah,
of
yeah,
my
yep,
now
yep,
I'm on the outside of like the system because I
yeah,
shut off my mouth without thinking about it.
yeah. A distinct possibility. So be careful with your words, because yeah, every action we take has some kind of repercussion or butterfly effect, and if you know are out of control and you're abusive, there in normal civil society there are there are repercussions, there are consequences. So just, I guess, be careful, be really careful that your words aren't so damaging that it creates a situation that is irreparable, right?
Well, it says dire consequences, like
Dire consequences.
having to mouth off at a police officer and then getting a
Oh yeah.
traffic ticket or something, like some sort of road rage moment, and you're like, fuck, now I have like a
Right. Well, and look at what the dire consequences could potentially be. Here's Mars. I'm sorry, here's Saturn at 22 degrees of Aquarius at the bending of the nodes. So Saturn is the planet of consequences. It is the planet that says, you done fucked up, and here's your ticket, here's your sentence, you know, here are the repercussions, the reality check. So again, CV's right on the mark here. Be careful of how you express yourself, because it could lead to a turning point that isn't good. But what I would say is look at the Aquarius and Capricorn area of your chart for that area of your chart going maybe forward towards growth potentially. Maybe another way of thinking of that Mercury Pluto square is just having a really difficult conversation that had to be made, and maybe that allows you to move forward with your commitment, which is another signification of Saturn, is binding you to something. So getting everything out on the table then could lead to committing and making plans, where Mercury is moving through Taurus again and making something real and tangible. All right. Remco says this first quarter moon has a nice trine coming from Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces. Yeah, so hopefully that will help us to soften any of the challenges that we're going through with that as well. Remco says, loving the live today, but I'll have to leave you. Oh no, Remco. Well, thank you, Remco, for being here. Have a lovely day, my friend. And thank you for coming. We'll see you at the next one. All right, CV, we're almost there.
I'm still, by the way, I'm thinking about that trine.
Yeah.
From the Pisces party.
The Pisces party. The Pisces pity party.
Pool party, pity party. And
pool party. There you go. It could be a pity party.
I'm standing by my big tears moment, right? Because I feel, if anything, like a trine from Jupiter in Pisces just like heightens the emotion. It's like putting a magnifying glass on it.
Yeah. And so simultaneously, while we have Mercury moving into Taurus, Saturn going through the north bending of the nodes, we have Jupiter making a conjunction to Neptune. And that's going to perfect on the 12th, but we're going to be feeling it up in with all these other transits simultaneously. So that third decan of Pisces is about sacrifice. It's a Mars ruled decan, and it's a Mars ruled decan in a Jupiter house. So it says, what are you willing to give up? How are you willing to fight for the dream, for the vision, for the idealism? What are you willing to do? So that may lead to some very humbling moments where we say, can we do this dream? What are we going to give up? Because a lot of the things that we've been trying to bring into reality, they require sacrifice. If you're trying to, sometimes when you have to achieve something great, there's always sacrifice involved, whether it's like an athlete that's training and giving up social events when they're younger to train for like the Olympics or something, or whether it's an outlay of resources to achieve a material goal, or if it's a political idealism that's happening, a crusade of any type does require sacrifice. And this may be the moment where we're saying, oh my goodness, what do we really have to give up to bring this into reality, right? But I think that the manifestation of that comes when Venus and Jupiter come together at the eclipse. So I'll just throw that out there. On the 14th, Mars will move into Pisces. So there Mars is joining the pool party in its own, eventually it'll be in its own decan. It's not in the first decan, but it may accelerate the leaving the 8 cups behind and going off into your dreamland maybe this is where you're like, oh, fuck it, I'm just gonna go sit on my floaty and, have a drink and just chill out for a little bit. That might be the impulse that you have after all this intensity of the time before.
I just had the vision that like the pool party is some sort of like hot tub situation, and like Mars just turns it into like boiling water.
Right, the jets. All I could think of when you said that was like hot tub time machine. So Mars is just like, you're gonna go back to the time of the dinosaurs and have to fight some T-Rex now. Like, I don't know. But yes, turning up the heat, turning up the jets, making, having the bubbles,
Yeah.
excitement is part of that now. Maybe, like getting our emotions a little bit riled up in that way. Yeah, Claire says, yes, where's my floaty? Yeah. She says, y'all, my life, it's such a mess this month. Yeah, Claire, I mean, without giving away too much with Claire, but Claire is feeling the fixed rising hellscape that some of us are also experiencing. So I feel you, Claire, and I really just give my empathy out to all of you fixed risings right now, going through some really big changes in your life. We'll get through it. Us fixed risings don't like change, but maybe the shakeups will put us in a better position moving forward, hopefully.
It's not a better position, at least a much different position.
It'll be different.
So
Yeah.
our lives are being ripped open by
Yeah.
the four
Don't say that, CV. We don't want things to be different. It's like we want things to stay the same. Like, this is my Taurus moon talking.
new kind of same, just different.
Yeah, and funnily enough, without giving away too many details, a lot of the battles I'm fighting personally right now are to keep things the same. Do you know what I mean? To like keep a sense of stability in my life, and it's a Herculean effort to do something of that nature. And it will be a change, but it'll also be fighting to stay. So, all right, if we move forward, the last thing we have on our aspect here, and thanks for all hanging out with us today, is just the culmination of this lunar cycle with the full moon in Libra 3. And I will have another guest that I have yet to schedule, but I will schedule them soon, that will come on and we'll break this down in depth. But here we have the moon at 26 degrees of Libra and the sun at 26 Aries. Also, Mercury is going to be making its heliacal rise and applying to Uranus, which could be like, oh, wow, new messages. That's a shock. So some shocking revelations. Jupiter and Neptune are coming together or separating. What do you think we've got going on here? What are we trying to balance at this full moon, CV?
It feels like the new moon was this moment of like, okay, like what's the vision? What's the thing I'm trying to bring into creation? What is the turning point in this story that's been happening? And suddenly, like Libra always kind of feels to me like, oh, but other people exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
But how does this affect others?
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it's true. And sometimes we have to take into account, some other perspective, even if we're going towards a long cherished personal goal. It does have reverberations out into the others. And with this decan, if Susanna's still here, here's your Four of Swords decan, right? With the third decan of Libra, where maybe we need to rest a little bit. Maybe we need to meditate, think about how our actions have affected others. I think of this decan as restoring balance and equilibrium
yeah.
through many tiny actions, but also through becoming centered within. Instead of searching for peace externally, you can create it and bring it to a situation through your actions. So to me, the culmination of this act that we're doing is actually a restoration of peace through and fighting for it on some level, like trying to establish it in the new moon. And then we're going to bring something back into balance by this crusade that we've gone on, this journey. Rachel is reminding me, essence will remain, Spencer, even as the form must change. Hope that reassures. Well, thank you, Rachel, for throwing my own words back in my face. Isn't that funny? This is what I love about all of you out there is, you know, that's what I try to tell people on this channel all the time. Essence changes or form changes, but the essence remains. It's, as astrologers, as people who work with divination and philosophy, we can intellectualize these experiences a lot. And then when we go through it personally as human beings, it's a humbling, isn't it? It's like, oh, even though I knew that was coming and I know what I said should happen and what I should do, sometimes you have to take your own advice and work through it. And I'm totally messing with you, Rachel. I'm laughing along with you. I totally agree 100%. And it's a good reminder. And I think sometimes when we are in positions of trying to be stability for other people, whether it's through sharing our wisdom and our insight, we do have to take some of that time to give that energy to ourselves. Because if we're always constantly just giving this energy, we can get burnt out. We can get cast about. And I'm a firm believer. I'm a firm believer that just because we have some maybe additional insight and clarity into symbolic languages, that doesn't necessarily put us on a pedestal. I'm actually a firm believer in taking people down from that pedestal and, smashing those hierarchies. So I love it when life brings me the opportunity to do that and to walk my own talk and humble me in that way. Right?
Absolutely. No, I was thinking, coming full circle, right back to the very beginning conversation when we were talking about Will Smith, and someone's like, but he reads the Bhagavad Gita. And it's like, well, yeah, like, just because you study this stuff or you sort of devote your life to maybe understanding a certain philosophy, like, in the moment we all get tested, and we don't always like we don't always act, you know we don't always measure up to the perfection that we hope to attain.
Yeah. And CV, that's actually a really important Pisces lesson, is how can we accept the gap between our lived experience and our ideals and
Yeah.
our aspirations, right? So there may be some challenging things where we have to come into acceptance of what is truly possible versus what we've been aspiring towards over these last few months or weeks or whatever, however this is going to play out. So, yeah, and Rachel's confirming this as it's something I'm having to keep reminding myself of as the desired form seems out of reach. Yeah. And she says, CV, our tests are the greatest teachers. Yeah, 100%. So, I appreciate your wisdom, Rachel, and contributions. So I really value this community in that we have in this chat here. We've got professional astrologers here. We've got professional tarot readers. We've got philosophers. We've got chefs and light workers. I like it being something where this isn't just CV and I, waxing poetic. We get additional amazing insights from people here too, and it's a more democratic type of experience. I really enjoy that. So thank you all for being that for us today. Okay, so I guess the last thing I'll say about this full moon: try to maintain your center from the inside out. Expect that there probably will be some messages regarding your resources that may be slightly unexpected. Doesn't mean they're going to be bad. It just means that it's like, whoa, I didn't see that coming with Mercury and Uranus. I'm always, it never fails to amaze me how Uranus, even when I see a Uranus planetary like contact happening, I'm still surprised by what happens. It's so strange. It's like, oh, well, there's that, but it's like, holy shit, I didn't see that thing coming. So there's always some kind of wild card shake up with that, that kind of lightning bolt energy of Uranus. Okay, I'm going to stop my. Go ahead.
I will just say last thing, that moon though, the full moon in Libra really feels like an integration moment coming from that new moon, right? To me, it just reminds me of, you brought the Four of Swords. Like, I think about how when I learn something new, or I'm having a frazzled day and I'm going through my experiences and I sit down and take a 20-minute meditation, right, to like process, and then I wake up and I'm like, oh, okay, like now I understand there's kind of a shift in direction. So it feels like that. It feels like a moment to sort of take step back, and maybe even have a quality meditation.
Yeah, and just pointing out that Venus is in her exaltation. That's hosting the moon, right?
Yeah.
Although I will point out that Venus is in aversion to the moon and the sun, and the exaltation lord is Saturn for the moon. So Venus might be trying to have this idealism, but there's a Saturnian element to this full moon, because Saturn. Sometimes when I heard this from Martine Hermes, when the domicile lord, in this case Venus to the moon, is in aversion, can't be seen.
Yeah.
Okay, the exaltation lord takes over. So this may be a Saturnian full moon on some level, where we're finally saying, okay, it's finally time to move on. It's finally time to let go of that old limiting glass ceiling narrative, and that will help move you forward. There's an ending associated with this as well. Okay, CV, we've got two more things to discuss before we wrap up for the day. Thank you for your time today.
You're welcome.
And your insights and your intuition. Appreciate you joining me today. So the animal that I got was the, should we do the animal or the I-Ching first? What do you think?
Ooh, I-Ching.
Okay, so let's do the I-Ching first. The I-Ching is, sorry, was that over the mic? Like I got a phone call.
Yeah.
It was. That's fun. Sorry. Awesome. So there you go. I'll mute all of my phones here. So the I-Ching is number 10 that we got for this particular lunation. And number 10 translates to treading, and treading specifically on a tiger's tail. So if Space Tiger Tarot is still here, they can give us some insight into whether we should step on your tail or not, being also, I think also a Chinese New Year tiger also. I'm going to guess no. I've seen pictures of Andrea's dad, and I was like, oh no, like don't mess with Andrea, her dad. So treading on the tail of the tiger is about having the correct behavior in what could be a dangerous or difficult situation. It's really about behaving according to the proper decorum. It's about saying, what are you going to do when faced with conflict or a difficult situation, and recognize, and this works with our animal, which was the monkey. Traditionally, monkeys and tigers in Chinese astrology are diametrically opposed. So, there's danger for a monkey if he's hanging out with a tiger, right? Like you may want to mess around, you may want to like crack jokes at someone's expense, and you could get the paw to the face, as we saw in the Oscars, right? So there's two changing lines that we have with this I-Ching. Yeah, Rachel says the I-Ching was calling in. Line number 3 says, a one-eyed man is able to see. A lame man is able to walk. He treads on the tail of a tiger. The tiger bites him. Misfortune. Like a warrior acting on behalf of his great prince. So this is describing a situation where we may not be able to see all of the repercussions of the action that we're taking. The one-eyed man. And the quote-unquote lame man is maybe not able to walk as gracefully or as skillfully as someone who wouldn't have that challenge. And I think it's a warning that we have to be careful of overconfidence, right? We have to be careful of getting ourselves into a situation that we're maybe not up to, up to the task of doing. I wrote down, don't bite off more than you can chew. Now, there's a caveat to this that I think is important. The last part of the book that I was reading about this that I like, it's Jack M. Balkin's The Laws of Change. I really, really like that author and his approach to the I-Ching. He's a professor of law at Yale, so it's really interesting. He says sometimes it's necessary to plunge ahead and take a calculated risk, especially if we have no other choice, or if our backs are up against the wall, or if we're doing this out of a sense of duty and loyalty to others, right? So even though we may not feel that we have all the skills, all the confidence, all the necessary tools or resources, we may have to just take that leap anyway, if it's for a greater, higher purpose, right? Have you had situations in your life like this where you've had to take this leap and just figure out the details later?
All the time.
I'm tossing up these softballs for you.
I'm laughing. I'll just share this note, but like I just I just returned from Morocco. I signed up with a friend of mine's a henna artist, and she was like, "Hey, we're gonna go like this henna conference." I had no idea what a henna conference was. I didn't know anything about Morocco, and I just was like, "Sure." And like I just, just example, I don't pack when I travel, or I don't think about packing. So I went there and ended up having this amazing experience and learning about this whole new world. But yeah, I was completely unprepared. So anyway,
you don't pack when you travel?
I mean, I don't think about it. Like I pack the night
Oh.
before. Like I don't. I'll go places and not do any sort of research and just feel like, oh well, here we go.
You and I have very different temperaments, which is great. I love it. But if I was going on a trip to Morocco, I would be like, okay, what do I need? I got this. This is all my Virgo energy. I was like, okay, I want to go here. Here, I know I've got to hit this at this time.
No. I mean, I pack because I'm just years of event coordinating. I've learned how to like pack, but really, I had no idea. I was like, oh, I don't know what we're doing. I'm just gonna go and hang out with these people and see what happens. And
yeah, totally.
So, anyways,
well, and this is why it's good to have friends that have balancing energy, because I think a lot of the time we can get really, involved in our own way of doing things, and maybe in a conversation with me, I know when you've done your IG lives, I've been like, hey, CV, introduce your guest. And then for you, like you can help me not be so anal retentive about like taking a risk, taking a leap. And so this is why it's important to have conversations with people that have a different perspective than you. It's something we're lacking in modern society right now, is we put ourselves in these echo chambers. And I think it's really a detriment to everyone, because a lot of the times you can get a much richer experience by having that type of exchange from a very different approach to life. It's not that one approach is better or worse than the other. They're just different. And it helps to bring a balance to our experience. So thank you for your sharing your experience with that. Hopefully I'll make it to Europe one day like you and have a wonderful Moroccan brunch on a terrace overlooking, is it near the ocean?
I wasn't near the ocean, but it is. Technically it's on the continent of Africa.
Right. Oh yeah. But yeah. I'm such a bad geographic American.
It's okay. But no, I was just actually was in Marrakesh almost the whole time. But at any rate, I will back you up to say that I only travel with Virgos.
Right.
That's how I survive.
Right. Balanced energy for sure. Okay, so that's the line number 3 that's changing. There's one other changing line, number 6. And it says, and I quote, "Examine your conduct. Consider whether its effects are favorable. When everything is fulfilled, supreme good fortune." So this is about being pragmatic, proactive in the pursuit of your goals, but also taking stock of what you've accomplished so far by your method. And you and I are comparing our methods on how we would go about achieving a travel goal potentially. Yeah. And you can compare and say what has worked well, what doesn't, and how can we make the adjustments that need to be made at that full moon in Libra, how are we going to make the adjustments to bring things back into harmony and back into balance? So, you can learn just as much from your failures as you can from your successes, sometimes even more.
Probably more.
Probably more, yes. So I do think that the hard work is going to pay off with this new moon, depending on the pragmatic nature of your goal and whether it's in service of not just yourself, but your community as well. Like if you're really just trying to achieve some highfalutin thing that has no possibility of coming into reality, you may be in line for a disappointment. But if you are just really trying to fight for something very meaningful for not just you, but for others as well, even if you're not prepared, I think you'll figure it out. You can learn from experience. I think that's another thing with Aries is it's not about hemming and hawing about like Libra and saying, what if I do this? And what if I do this? And what's the pros and cons? It's like, no, I'm just going to do it and I'll learn what I need to know in the moment. Right?
Yep.
Right.
Correct.
What did you learn in Morocco, CV?
Got so many things. Honestly, I learned about like the art of henna, which I had mine's sort of fading now.
Oh, very cool.
I will just say this. I ended up I feel like a very privileged position because I was with Moroccan henna artists as well as a group of henna artists from across the world who were there to study specifically the Moroccan lineage of henna.
Nice.
And so it was really truly insightful and beautiful, and we will have a separate conversation with that. Hopefully on my IG live I'm going to interview I'd like to interview one of the Moroccan head artists. So.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, let me know.
No.
Okay. So these changing lines are resolving in hexagram number 43, which is called resolution, determination, decisiveness, speaking forthrightly, elimination or eradicating remaining evils. So a breakthrough. So this is helping us to let go of our hesitation, of letting go of our self-doubt and moving forward with dignity towards our new future and our new future reality and our new future sovereignty and independence. So I want to talk about the monkey real quick here. The monkey, I really like this book. I'll show you the book that I use as my divinatory device. It's Animal Frequency by Melissa Alvarez. And what I do when I do these lives, I just, okay, there it is. Just do it as like a flip through. And she talks about monkey representing understanding, compassion, and intelligence. The monkeys are very social animals, so they have they take care of each other a lot of the time. I mean, they can fight with each other and mess with each other, but ultimately they care about their families and their communities. They require a lot of intellectual stimulation. They use tools. There's ingenuity. So this may be a time to solve a puzzle, right? To solve something that's been vexing you. Taking action rather than sitting back, maybe taking some time to play too. I think sometimes we get real serious about these goals that we have. Maybe not playing enough, right? And I wrote down, careful. It literally says in her version, careful of trickery and jokes. People could take offense or react in anger. And I was like, oh, wow, we've witnessed that already. Is Chris Rock, is he a monkey? Because I wonder what his Chinese New Year animal is. But anyway, so be resourceful, seek out the companionship of family and friends, utilize your honor and charisma and communication to establish your sovereignty and your leadership, right? All right, CV, any monkey thoughts? Are there any monkeys in Morocco?
Yeah, I mean, it was very. No, they have the men who have like the monkeys in a chain, and like there were like on several occasions I was like, if I wasn't in a foreign country, I would like assault these men and steal their I have such a love of primates, but yeah, so
well,
very smart, very
I was born in the year of the monkey, so I've utilized that as a symbol, as a guide, trying to find creative solutions to things. it's a little different than that tiger energy. And sometimes when we are the animal, the astrological animal that is opposite of the year, you're
Yeah.
going through some big changes. So you're watching a monkey in the year of the tiger right now, trying to navigate around
A
the tiger
sign
tails.
chart.
Yeah, exactly. So interesting times for sure. So Henry Harrison is saying treading is also loo, a pair of shoes. So connotes doing your duty. Yeah. So bringing in the element of duty again. I like that. It's so Aries, right? Yeah, definitely. We're trying to fight for something that we really believe in and say this is who we are and this is what we're going to do. Rachel says, terrifies me too much, Virgo. Admire that faith so much. Well, I'll have to have like an
While we're
astrology,
three together,
yeah, a group trip, right?
you guys get to plan. I can.
Right. There you go. Well, maybe we'll do an astro workshop in Europe someday and, you know, CV can get us there and we'll do the planning.
I'll be the white machine. You do the
Right.
planning.
Um, yeah, Claire says would love to hear about your trip. So yeah, CV is going to be doing something on her Art of the Zodiac channel. Follow her on Instagram.
Thank you.
Sherilyn is here. Thank you, Sherilyn, for participating today. Nice to see you. Yes, had to cut neighbor's barbed wire fence to help a deer that was bound up in it. Had a long, complicated relationship to the neighbor. Just couldn't let the deer suffer.
Wow.
Yeah, just there's all sorts of manifestations of this energy and that maybe that malefic enclosure and moving forward, right? Andrea is acknowledging the I-Ching and the monkey messages. Says Spencer, and here I am, a Chinese tiger, and we are friends. Yeah, I think that even if you have opposite animals in the zodiac, doesn't mean you can't be friends. I mean, there's things to learn from one another. Same thing with if you have like, let's say your sun signs are opposite. I have Capricorn friends as a Cancer sun. I'm sure that CV, you have some Libra people in your life that you can learn from. Yeah, so sometimes they can be complementary, as well as learning from the different perspectives that one another have. So, yeah, and Andrea, I really appreciate your friendship. Carol's a monkey. Rachel says I could go to the other extreme, which is interesting. Yeah, definitely we find balance through the extremes sometimes. Well, CV, we did it. We got through a myriad of symbols, stories, humbling realizations, a beautiful chat from our wonderful astro community here. I want to thank everyone once again for participating. If you could do me a huge favor, folks, I know it sounds cliche, but it really does help us if you hit the like on the video. Becoming a subscriber of the channel is such a wonderful validation of the work that we're doing here as well. And again, if you want to make a donation to what we're doing, you can do a super chat with the chat here, or after the fact, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. I would also say that if you're going through some tough times, both CV and I do astrological readings. CV also does tarot now, right? Do you do tarot in person and virtually?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Detroit and New Jersey, I'm here for you.
Yeah. So we can find CV at artofthezodiac.co, right? .co.
Yep.
And are you also doing your apothecary goods?
Yeah, I do. I don't really talk about it, but you can buy stuff on my website or message me directly.
Awesome.
I make custom apothecary but yeah, mostly readings these days.
Nice. So visit CV, follow her on Instagram because she has a number of really amazing guests, including our friend William that was here today, that has been a regular guest. So I will come on the show every once in a while and we'll chat, and I'll hand over hosting duties to CV, and we have good conversations in that regard. Yeah, make sure that you sign up for the Decans of Aries and the Spring Bundle if you haven't already. You've got till Friday to use the code Aries20 to save 20% on either one of those. So that's what's
I'm
that?
going to shout out to that. I want to say one, as far as guests go, publicly, let me state here, I want to get Dr. Claire Moon back on.
Yeah.
Because Dr. Claire Moon is also one of my favorite astrologers who does a weekly thing on IG. But your decans, right? Like, I think like if anyone's doing any sort of decan walk, right? Because here we go, Aries.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just take it from the start. This is a great chance. I feel like your decan webinar, if you haven't hopped on it already, what a way to begin in Aries.
I appreciate that. I'm really enjoying this journey. And I started at a weird place, and I started in Virgo. Just it was arbitrarily. It was like this. I'm going to start doing this. But yes, it is a great entry point at the astrological new year, and I really enjoy the conversations that we have in that. And I put a lot of work and energy just because of my own feelings of duty to my community to help educate them and to you know g- be able to gift uh, practical ways of dealing with this energy, whether it's planets that you have in that decan, or the people in your life that may have the planets in that decan, or everybody has Aries somewhere in their chart. So being able to deal with that. So thank you so much for that shout out. And yes, Claire at Aligning Light Astrology, join CV for another talk. She is a great astrologer. So that's what we've got for today.
Yeah.
Appreciate all of you. Appreciate you joining me. We will have another full moon talk with a to be announced guest probably in a couple weeks here. And I'm probably going to do another Q&A at some point as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that. You can sign up for my mailing list if you want to know when those are going to happen. So thanks, everyone. Thank you for being here, CV. I hope everyone has a great new moon and that you're able to establish your own sovereignty, independence, and that your dreams are manifesting for you. And hang in there throughout all the challenging times as well. Remember, be kind to one another, be kind to yourself, and I'll see you the next time.
Thank
Peace.
you. Bye.